Good morning, Rabotai. Welcome to Breakfast in the Class. Breakfast in the Class today is dedicated in loving memory of Renee Levy, aleh shalom, Leilu Nishmat, Rina Bat Rachel v'Yosef, aleh shalom, sponsored by Morris S. Levy and family. Also dedicated in loving memory and Leilu Nishmatem for Reuven ben Farha, Reuben Joseph Bibi, aleh shalom, and Moshe ben Victoria, aleh shalom, the Bibi and Gindi family. Also dedicated for a speedy and complete Fuah Shlema for Chana Bat Simafega, our Rabbanit, and as well for Rabbi Abari Eliyahu Shimon Mamazafu Tunei, and dedicated in loving memory of Faraj Kashanian, alav hashalom. Leilu Nishmat Faraj Goel ben Batya, Ruach Amen Tenechenu Megan Eden. On his sixth Askara by his daughter Miriam Kashanian, Dad alav hashalom, you are loved and missed more each and every day. The week of Kobru finally is sponsored and dedicated in honor of you and your substantial capacity to do good today and every day. I also want to give a shout out to the Green family from London who listen to the class every day on the way to school and whose son in year 5 listens every day and learns and grows in the most beautiful way. Hazaku Baruch to the Green family in London. Baruch Hashem. Okay, let's begin. The pasuk tells us, "Umiknei Rav haya libnei Reuven," and there was a tremendous amount of cattle that belonged to the sons of Reuven, to the tribe of Reuven, ulibnei Gad atzum meod, and to the tribe of Gad even more atzum meod. So it's interesting. Miknei Rav haya libnei Reuven, v'libnei Gad atzum meod. Tremendous amount. So there's two ways of reading this. One way is with a comma in between Libnei Reuven and Ulibnei Gad. So Bnei Reuven had a lot of sheep, but Bnei Gad had a tremendous amount of sheep. Or one could read it as one long sentence. There was a lot of sheep to the tribes of Reuven and Gad. They had tremendous amount. And then the tremendous amount is going on both of them, okay? But I want to read to you a fascinating insight from Rabbi Yaakov Emden. And he writes something which is so interesting, and specifically this comma is talked about by the Kli Yakar. So let's begin. Rabbeinu Bahye brings that the Midrash says, "Umiknei Rav," the tremendous amount of cattle, ha'osher, when riches come, ki sheba min hashamayim, when it comes from heaven, hu mitkayem, it stays with a person. And when wealth does not come from heaven, it's not divinely ordained, it does not stay. That's what Hannah says in her song, Hashem morishu ma'ashir, God makes impoverished and makes very wealthy. Mashpil brings down, af miromem also brings back up. So the pasuk over here is telling us that when it came to Bnei Gad and Bnei Reuven, they had a tremendous amount of wealth, but at the same time, they were unfortunately unable to keep hold of it because they did not pay the proper attention to the way things should be set up in their life. And let me express what that means. The pasuk tells us that the Bnei Gad and the Bnei Reuven, they came to Moshe Rabbeinu and they said, "We have so much sheep. You're about to take us into the land of Israel. It's not so big. It's going to be divided amongst all the tribes that we have here in the desert. There's so many Jews. The land is so small. How much is each person going to get? If I have a tremendous amount of sheep, they need tremendous grazing lands. So is there this amount of grazing lands, of pasture for our sheep to graze? So therefore we'd rather not go into the land of Israel. We'd rather stay on the other side of the river Jordan, me'ever anahar, the 2.5 tribes, Gad, Reuven, and Chatzi Shevet Menashe, and half of the tribe of Menashe, took their portion not in the land of Israel, but outside of its borders, across the Yarden, across the Jordan River." My friends, the pasuk tells us that they came to Moshe and they said, "We will build places for our animals and tents for our families." And you see, they were so concerned with their wealth that what did they talk about? Setting up first, taking care of first, their animals. They put their animals before their families. And you see as well that this this gift of wealth, therefore, which was not seen in the proper way, which was not used in the proper way, was not something that was blessed to be able to stay with them. Oftentimes, you read something like this and you think to yourself, what kind of people are this that would put their money in front of their families? But unfortunately, decisions like that are happening on a not daily basis, but on an hourly basis. You know, if you don't take your wife's phone call at work, what'd you just do? You put your business ahead of your family. If you're not there for the kids' events or for their milestones, because you know what? Daddy's got to work. What are you saying? You're putting your animals, the value, your work, ahead of your children. You know, this idea is a lot more widespread than one might think. And if God is giving you that wealth for the purpose of taking care of your family, for the purpose of sending them to Jewish schools, to getting them the education, to helping set them up, to giving them what they need in this life, to building that special Jewish family, if you're not doing that with your wealth, then HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, this is not the divine gift that I gave you. And then it suffers the vicissitudes, it suffers the trials and tribulations of time, and eventually it disappears from the person's possession. Rabbi Yaakov Emden writes something very, very beautiful about this. He says, I'll give you an example. There was a wealthy man who was very, very, very powerful. He was very, very generous, a wonderful person. In everything that he did, he always tried to do the right thing. And he had a fellow that worked for him. He was his right-hand man. He did everything for him. His EA, his executive assistant, shall we say, in life. Everything that he did, this man was there with him. One day, he's traveling, this fabulously wealthy man, and he loses a briefcase that is filled with gold and silver. Anyway, he thinks to himself, what are the odds that I left this briefcase with gold and silver in a public place and it's still going to be there? Impossible. There's no way. He sends his assistant. His assistant goes in this crowded subway station. He finds this briefcase with all these valuables and it's still there, untouched. Brings it back. The fellow, when he hands him the gold and the silver, this rich man, he starts to cry. His assistant thinks that the guy's lost it. You know, he doesn't want to question him. He doesn't want to ask him what's going on. So he just keeps his mouth shut. Well, time goes on, and this fellow who had everything, slowly but surely, lost all of the wealth that he'd accumulated. And the fellow who used to work for him could no longer be hired by him. The man had no money for himself, so he had to go out and get another job. And this fellow went further and further and further down in his debt until the point where he could no longer sustain himself. Everything he tried failed, and he was forced to raise tzedakah, to go door to door to beg for money for his family. One year, as the time was coming towards the holiday of Passover, this man realized that a lot of the poor people, they would go to visit wealthy people before the holiday and try and get them in their mercy before the holiday to be able to help them out. And they heard about this wealthy man off somewhere, and maybe Erev Pesach, if you got to meet him, you might be able to curry favor with him, and maybe the man would help you out, help you get back on your feet. He joins this group of poor people that are traveling to the man's house, and as they're making this long journey to get to this rich man's house, unfortunately, our formerly rich fellow, he falls ill, and he asks the people. He says, "I need to pull over, please. I feel like I'm nauseous. I'm very weak." And they pull over, and the man gets out of the car. He sits down on the bench. His world is still spinning, and he says, "Please, could you guys wait for me? You know, maybe a couple hours, a few hours." They wait for him an hour, too. But eventually, he says, "Look, I still don't feel well. Maybe you could wait another few hours." They tell him, "Look, this whole trip was planned so that we could get there to this rich man's house, Erev Pesach. If we don't leave now, we're not going to make it. The whole trip will be for nothing. You know, we feel terrible for you, but you know, you should stay here until you feel better. And you know, and we're sorry, we have to carry on." The guy feels terrible, but he doesn't feel able to continue the journey. So he sits there in the hotel while everyone else carries on in their journey, on their travels. A little while later, he finally feels good enough to travel. He gets back in the car. He gets to this wealthy man's house and he knocks at the door. And the doorman at this house tells him, I'm really sorry. You know, everyone's been and everyone's gone. And you missed the window. Come back next year. Season's greetings. Come back next year. The man says, I don't think you understand how far I've traveled. I don't think you understand how much I've given up to be here. It's Erev Pesach now. I'm going to miss the holiday with my family. I came all the way here just to see if I could get this appointment. And the man says, yeah, but you missed the appointment. You know, he only holds these appointments, Erev Pesach, every year. A long line of people. They've all been and gone. It's too late. The man's begging, he's crying, he's pleading. In all the noise and the hubbub, all of a sudden a face appears in the window upstairs. And who's upstairs? The wealthy man. He sees this poor guy begging on his knees. He feels terrible. It's true he's been seeing people for many, many hours, and the hours are done, but in his heart, a little bit of rahmanut, of mercy, is awakened. And he calls the person, he says, let the man in. Man comes in, the rich fellow hears him out, listens to everything he says, understands the dire predicament that he's in. It's horrible, and it's heartbreaking. The man says, listen, it's Erev Pesach, you're not going to make it back to your family anyway now. He says, I want to help you, but why don't you stay with me for the holiday? He says, I would be happy to. I have no place to go anyway. Man says to this poor fellow, he says, listen, I'm going to take my driver. The driver's going to bring you to the, what's it called? He's going to bring you to the mikveh. You'll go to the bathhouse, you'll shower, you'll get cleaned up, a haircut, etc., etc. He'll take care of you. And you meet me and you come back, you take a rest. We'll go to shul together, we'll have a beautiful holiday. Guy says, okay, I'm in. Guy gets him in the car, takes him down to the spa, is ready to take him everything. And he tells him, go inside, get undressed here in the room, go inside to the bathhouse. Someone will give you a massage, they'll clean you up nice and good, and everything, we'll take care of everything from here. As soon as he goes in, the driver, according to the instructions of his employer, takes all the man's old flea-ridden clothing with the holes and the stains and whatever, smells, and he throws it in the garbage. And he's got beautiful suit waiting in the car, a complete new change of clothes. For this man, he's going to feel like $1 million. But the driver goes outside, and he realizes, to his great dismay, that in the 2 minutes he's left the car running outside, someone's hopped in the car and driven away. He can't believe it. Now, if you think this is a crazy story, yesterday, my cousin made a brit milah. My uncle and aunt bought all the food. They're packing up their car, all the food to bring to the brit milah. They made one last trip. You couldn't fit another donut, another bagel in the car. One last trip from inside the house to the car. And they came out and the car had been stolen. And all of the food for the brit, gone. The night before the brit. They had to rebuy everything that happened yesterday. Someone actually told me, Rabbi, I want a part of that mitzvah of remaking a brit in the last minute. Tell your uncle I want to help him buy that food for the brit milah. Okay? Now listen to this. This is crazy. The car's gone. His brand new Mercedes, I don't know what's the fancy one. Nobody knows? Okay. Sorry? SL 500. Okay. Shtabach Shemo. Yeah? Anyway, the car's gone. The driver calls the cops. He's checking the video footage. He gets busy. He goes down to the police station to file a report. Meanwhile, our poor, formerly rich man comes out of the bath with his towel on, and his clothing's gone, and the driver's gone. He looks outside, he maybe peeks out the window, there's no car. The fellow's left him naked in the bed. He has nowhere to go, he has no money, he has no phone, nothing. He thinks to himself, I can't believe it. I came late. The rich guy took me in, sent me to the bathhouse. They took now even my clothes. I can't believe this was happening to me. Erev Pesach, nowhere to go. The driver completely forgets in all the hubbub about his charge until the rich fella comes to shul thinking that the guy must have gone to shul already. He's looking around the synagogue. The guy's not there. Can't find him. He calls the house. He says, did you wake him up for the holiday? The driver all of a sudden realizes, wake him up. He's not taking a nap. He's not AC. He's upstairs taking a bath from Home Alone, right? Where is he? Still in the mikveh. He says, I can't believe it. Do you know the car got stolen today? He goes, yeah. He goes, well, the car got stolen before I gave the guy the new suit clothes you sent me. And I think he's still in the mikveh. He's still in the bathhouse. The rich guy says, come here right now. They come together. They fly down to the place. They bring in the clothes. And as soon as they open the door to the mikveh, what do they see? This fellow sitting there in his towel 3 hours later. And he's singing and he's dancing. They give him the clothes. They take him to shul. And the fella says to this poor man, he says, I don't understand. He says, what don't you understand? He says, I was going to give you the big reveal to tell you who I was tonight. I used to work for you all those years ago. I was your right-hand man. You don't recognize me because now I'm the big dude. I'm the big boss. And this is where you are. I wanted to help you. But before I help you, I just wanted to understand. I have 2 questions. All those years ago, when I found all that extra money that you lost in the train station, brought it back, you were crying when you should have been laughing. You were crying when you should have been dancing and singing. And now, when everything is against you, you're dancing instead of crying. You're alone by yourself. You don't have a dime. You don't have a phone. You don't have clothes. You don't have your family. You were forgotten in the bathhouse, and you're singing and dancing. What's wrong with you? And the man says, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe it! Wow, how you been doing?" Gives him a big hug. Da da da. He says, "I'll tell you the truth." He says, "I was always taught by my father a big truth, and the truth is, the pasuk tells us." Gaon, the what's it called? Pride comes before the fall. You know that famous line from Mishle Lifnei Shever Gaon. Before you break, you're at the top of the pile. Every business deal I did was always great. Everything I touched turned to gold. But to think that I could leave a suitcase with gold and silver in a train station, and then no one would touch it, and it would come back to me. To realize that I was untouchable, that my life was perfect, filled me with a tremendous dread. Because I knew in that moment that there was only one way to go from here, and that was down. When things are perfect for a person, they need to be very worried. And in that moment, he says, I was already able to say to myself that the party's over. But when you found me in the mikveh, and I realized that things could not get any worse, that I was literally at rock bottom, and not only was I at rock bottom, but I was naked at rock bottom, I knew that there was only one direction to go, and that direction was up. So I was rejoicing in what was going to become the turn of my fortunes. My friends, this mashal, this parable for Rav Yaakov Emden is so instructive. It reminds us that when things are going so well, we have a tendency, as the pasuk says, Vayishman Yeshurun Vayiv'at. When Yeshurun, which is a euphemism for the Jewish people, when we've gotten fat, when we got lazy, When people get to the top of the pile, they get arrogant. They think that every success that they've had in business was their own success and their own genius. You know what happens? They don't need to be savvy anymore in their investments. They don't need to be careful. They're happy to take any risk. You know why? Because I'm brilliant enough that there is no risk factor if I decide that it's the right move to make. When you feel like you have the Midas touch, do you know what happens? Game over. It's game over. Because you're not wary of the potholes. That arrogance, lifnei shever gaon. Says the Kli Yakar something incredible. He says that the Bnei Reuven and the Bnei Gad came. But as I told you before, it says Miknei Rav, a lot of cattle to the Bnei Reuven. Ulibnei Gad atzum meod. Libnei Gad atzum meod was, and to the Bnei Gad was tremendous amount. Says the Kli Yakar, and I need you to hear this. Mitoch rom levavam. Who spoke to Moses? Who should have spoken first? Reuven is the Bechor, they are the eldest child. Mitoch rum levavam, from the arrogance of their hearts, kafzu b'nei Gad ledaber barosh. They came to speak first. Lifnei b'nei Reuven ha-Bechor, in front of the sons of Reuven, that were the eldest. Ki kach teva ha'osher, the nature of wealth, of fabulous wealth. Shenoten rum lev lebe'alav, it makes a person become arrogant in their heart. Ve'ashir hedyot, and a rich simpleton, kofetz barosh, jumps ahead of everyone else who might be far wiser and far more experienced. Ve'yaneh azut, and answers with chutzpah. Lo yevosh mipnei kol ish, he's embarrassed in front of no one. Eno cholek kavod labechor, he doesn't give honor to the eldest. V'lo l'shum bnei ha'ma'ala amitit, and not to anyone who has any levels of midot, of mitzvot, of Torah, of good character, of great service to the community. I don't care if you're a Vietnam vet. Do you know what I own? I don't care if you're a rabbi. I don't care if you're an old person. Maybe you have something to learn from me, from the new generation. Wealth will do that to a person. We will look at the result and think to ourselves that the result proves brilliance, genius, determination, and right. My friends, when a person does that, b'choshvam, when they think, ki al yedeh ha'osher hu mitromem, because he has a lot of money, he's now more elevated than anybody else. Ma oseh hakadosh baruch hu. What does God do to that person? With the overinflated heart filled with hot air. Notel nechasim mizeh, he takes the possessions of this one, v'noten lazeh, and gives it to someone else. Shneimar, like it says, ki Elokim shofet zeh yashpil v'zeh yarim, because God who judges brings down the person who's put himself too high and elevates the person who finds himself very low. And I think on some level that is the idea of tzedakah, that when I have so much, what do? I give a portion of what I have away. And why do I do that? Because every time, no matter how much I make, if I've given 10% away, there's still space in my vessel for more bracha. So I'm never at a state of fully full. I'm never at a state. You know, I remember watching in my car when we were charging the car, and you know what the car said? It said, we recommend only charging to 90%. And I was thinking, wow, I wonder if God made this car. Hashem also recommends only charging to 10%, to 90%, and ensuring that there's 10% that you've given away. That 10% that you give away means that I don't have everything. We have Yaakov Avinu who says, Yesh li Rav, I have a lot. And what does Esav say? Yesh li Kol, I have everything. You know what's fascinating to me about this fellow who says, Yesh li Kol, I have everything? When he goes to battle with Yaakov, and all the odds are that who should win? It's Yaakov and a bunch of children. Who should win this battle? Who should win this standoff? Esav. But yesh li kol. That is the sound effect of your life if you feel like everything's perfect and you don't need to do anything and you don't need to change and you don't need to grow and you don't need to evolve. It is the arrogance and pride that comes before the fall. My friends, there's one last piece that I'd like to read you before we conclude today. And that is that our rabbis told us that it is very important, therefore, when a person does succeed, to be able to, number one, make sure to give the charity that they're supposed to give. As the Gemara says, charity is to money like salt is to meat. When a person salts their meat, and I don't mean Salt Bay, I mean when they would salt the meat back in the day, not for kosher. The salt would preserve the meat, so the meat would not become spoiled. When you cook wine, what happens? Wine evaporates. But what happens when it's undergone the state of pasteurization? That wine is now much more difficult to spoil. So when you've lost some, you've retained the rest. When you've salted the meat, the nature of the salt is that it absorbs from the moisture, from the volume of the meat. So there's less meat than there was, but the less is what preserves that which remains behind it. And it is a truism of the capitalist society in which we live that ultimately each time we see a disastrous fall, it is always preceded by the excess spending, by the must-have everything mentality, by the stuff villain, the idea that I have to have all the stuff, charge all the stuff, get so much debt accumulated that I can't climb out from underneath it. That, my friends, everything yesh li kol atzum me'od is going to result in the fall. So number one, the idea is to make sure that you are giving tzedakah. And my friends, in order to do so, I highly recommend one thing. Go into your bank and ask them to open a sub-account. So you have your checking account, you may have your savings account, but you should have a third account. And that account is your maaser account. If you want to open your own 501c3, JCF, Mabadef, Hazaku Baruch, go that way. But if you're not going to do that, make sure that when you get paid, right away you separate. When you have income, you're separating that 10% of money to give to charitable causes. Because otherwise, you forget. And if the money has not been koshered with tzedakah, then it does not have the blessing to be able to stay preserved in your account. You think you're giving away 10%, but God is telling you, no honey, you're keeping 90%. If you don't give it away, you don't lose 10, you lose 100. Hashem should bless us to understand this truism. But last but not least, besides for the tzedakah element, is the show-off element. There's a term for a reason called new money. New money always needs to show old money that new money has arrived. It's ostentatious. It's in your face. But that's not the Jewish way. The way we say is en bracha sholet, blessing is only there al davar, on something hesamui min ha'ayin, which is hidden from the eye. If something is hidden from the eye, blessing can rest there. If something is out in the public, what happens? Ayin hara, all sorts of things happen to it. My friends, this is not only true on a metaphysical level, on a spiritual level. It's also true in the natural world. The minute you become a celebrity, what are the newspapers and the media? Oh, tracking every minute of your life, ruining that life. You made your money, go enjoy it, but enjoy it privately. When you splash it around everywhere and everyone knows who you are and what you did and what you're worth, all of a sudden they want to watch, they want to see you fall. The lawsuits come, the gold diggers come, everything is on its way to try and take that from you. What a gift it would be to be able to keep our successes quiet, humble. Penu lachem tzafona. I went to a fellow's house a little while ago, and I remember as I pulled up in front of the house, being surprised that the fellow was a very wealthy man, and the house, it wasn't just that it was simple, it was underwhelming. Anyway, I was surprised. I figured maybe he's living there until he builds his house. It was that kind of a situation. I knock on the door, guy opens the door, I open the door to the house, and the house was the most magnificent house I ever saw in my life. He'd hollowed out the house, built it down, built it out, built it back. And I said to him, your house is beautiful. I said, doesn't match the front. He goes, that's exactly how I like it. And I gave the man a hug and I had tears in my eyes. Because it's not often you meet a guy who really gets it. Spend your money on your family. Enjoy it. No one is telling you not to enjoy this world. Enjoy it. Love it. Brilliant. But you have to poke everyone else's eyes out with it. The other day we had the chief of police came to the synagogue that my father prays in Hathaway. My father's a rabbi. Anyway, so I'm sitting there in the synagogue, and the chief of police stands up and he says, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to ask everyone, we're having a lot of cars being stolen. Please make sure that you lock your cars. Now, people who don't come from Deal don't understand why you have to tell that to people. But in Deal, growing up, we never needed to lock our cars. You never need to lock your house. There was no crime. Today, that's no longer the case. They're stealing cars left, right, and center, as is evidenced yesterday by my uncle. Anyway, so he gives a whole long thing in his speech in the shul about making sure you lock your cars. Anyway, I stood up and I said, I have another solution to this wave of crime other than locking your car. I said, you could get a Honda minivan like mine, and don't worry, your car will be perfectly safe. No one needs to steal a Honda minivan. My friends, you understand this point? Flash it, someone wants to take it. Get your Honda minivan. Put crocodile leather on the seats if you want. Stick a Ferrari engine in that baby. Outfit the doors with jet propulsion. And no one will steal it. You know why? Because they don't know. They don't know to steal it. What a great thing. In all areas of wealth, and wealth is not just money. You're a brilliant person. Don't tell everyone how brilliant you are. You know how valuable that wisdom is in a board meeting, in a sales meeting, when they can't see you're coming? Feel the need to show them how smart you are before the meeting. You just cost yourself a tremendous advantage in that meeting. Bracha is shoreh al davar shesamui min ha'ayin. The more we can avert, make sure that there's less attention on us, the more blessing we find in our day-to-day life. Baruch Adonai Le'olam.